Last night, the Carolina Hurricanes were north of the border in Montreal, taking on the Montreal Canadiens, and they were very lucky to come away with 2 points as they won that game in a shootout with none other than former Montreal Canadian Jesperi Kotkaniemi scoring the game-winning goal. Find out just what wrong for the team in that game, what they did right to stay in the mix, and hear from Rod Brind'Amour all in this episode of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Caniacs. I'm your host, Jared Ellis, and you're listening to Locked On Hurricanes on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of this Wednesday evening. I know it's a little bit later than usual, but hey, we're here. And as always, don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at LO_Hurricanes and myself on Twitter at Jared Ellis _96 and subscribe to the show on YouTube. Now, folks, let's dive into this game from last night. And this was a mixed bag of a game. It really was. And for me, it was very frustrating as well, because especially through those first 40 minutes, the first period especially, it was really, really rough. And looking at that first period, it's something that not only in the first period, but mainly the first period, but it was something that throughout the game was just some really bad puck management. It was not good. The turnovers were bad. The turnovers led to both of Montreal's goals in the first period. That first period was the exact opposite of what we saw against Tampa Bay the other night. Everything they did right in that game against Tampa Bay, they did the exact opposite in this game against Montreal. That first period especially, it was really rough with Chatfield and Natchez turnovers leading to both of those goals, like I said. And the skating was bad. They almost just felt outmatched, honestly. There at the early stages of the game, it felt like going back to that game against Tampa, it felt like it was flipped. It felt like, we're the ones getting beat up. Thankfully, Jacob Slavin was able to get it to 2-1, and the Hurricanes didn't go into the intermission down 2 goals. That was really, really good for them. And it was just a very messy period. They were having trouble in the neutral zone. It was just really, really bad period of hockey. It was very frustrating. It really, really was, again, especially coming off of a game like they had against Tampa. And that, for me, that was almost the most frustrating part, is because you're coming off of this perfect performance, and then you go into this game, you're doing the exact opposite of it, and they were just giving up way too many opportunities. And like I said, puck management was bad. Their skating wasn't great. Turnovers, it was messy. It was really, really bad period of hockey. And then to cap off that really rough first period is Antti Raanta getting ran into, and he didn't come back. And we'll hear from Rod here in a bit about Antti Raanta and Jalen Chatfield, who also left the game with injury. But thankfully, both of those, they're just precautionary and doesn't look like it's too bad. But I'm just looking at this game and wondering what the heck went wrong for them. And I don't know if they were riding the high of that game against Tampa Bay. They're like, oh, heck yeah, we had such a good game there, and we're they're riding high, and not only that game against Tampa, the game against Arizona before that, were they riding that high and they just weren't focusing on Montreal as much as they should. Something Trip Tracy did bring up is that Montreal playing better than their record says. And, this is a prime example of that the numbers don't tell the whole story. And also, I've said it many times. I said it back when Arizona shut out the Hurricanes at home for nothing earlier in the season. These are NHL players. They are extremely talented hockey players, and anything can happen on any given night. And this was a prime example of that. And thankfully, heading into the second period, things got better. Freddie Anderson, again, obviously started this period in relief of Antti Ranta. Just quick rundown of this period. Brady Shea ended up tying it up for the Hurricanes, creating a whole new hockey game. It felt like it gave the Hurricanes a little bit of momentum in the moment, but the Habs came back quick, tied it up. And, with that goal, it really just felt with that one that it was one that Freddie really shouldn't have given up. I feel like he could have been a bit more aggressive on that save. And, I'll kind of, put, those goals on everyone. But you look at Antti Ranta's, both of the goals that he allowed, those weren't on him. This one did feel like it was a bit on Freddie. He could have played a bit more aggressive there, but especially it felt, as the Hurricanes, as the time went on, they were getting their feet under them, and it was better than the first period for sure. And it was in the power play, it was better than it was, but it still wasn't great. And power play as a whole, again, we knew it wasn't going to keep operating at that level it was in that Arizona and Tampa games. We knew that. I think pretty much any Hurricanes fan could expect that from you. I said that when we previewed this game, that I wasn't expecting them to go 3 for 4 or 4 for 5 on power plays like they had in those previous games. But I was expecting it to look like a threat, and I was expecting a power play goal. They were really performing at a really high level, and that wasn't the case in this game. Again, I think that they were riding that high of those really dominant wins, and they just, I guess, didn't take this as seriously as they should have. But you dive into the third period and bonus hockey. Third period, Chatfield didn't come back out due to upper body, and the fourth line, it was a really fourth line was probably the best line for the Hurricanes of that game. They were really pulling a big load for this entire game. And, the Hurricanes did tie it up with Derek Stepan, doing a heck of a lot of work of pushing and pushing and pushing. Paul Stastny finished it, but goaltender interference strikes again. Montreal challenges and gets overturned. And with that one, I personally didn't see anything, when watching this, and a lot of other people felt the same way. And there's just no consistency with these goaltender interference calls. And that's not just something with the Hurricanes, that's something league wide that it needs to be addressed. It really does. Because, like I said, there is no consistency when it comes to these goaltender interference calls, to the point where we don't even know what we're looking for anymore. Yeah, you have the textbook definition, of it, that's in writing and whatnot, but it never feels like that's what's getting called, and I really hope that something is done sooner rather than later to address the inconsistency of goaltender interference. It feels like over the past couple years, it has gotten really bad when it comes to that. And I mean, you could say, the age of social media and whatnot makes things, bigger than what they actually are. And that probably is the case for, a lot of stuff, but there's no consistency with these goaltender interference calls. But thankfully, on the back half of this third period, the Hurricanes were able to gain some momentum, which was really, really big. And, throughout I mean, you can look at, that goal in the first period as well, but the second and third periods, especially the Montreal, especially the first and second period, Montreal was the better team for sure. And really, in my opinion, the first half of the third period, they're the better team. They're the better team for the large majority of the game. And the Hurricanes were doing just enough to stay in it. And this team is really resilient. We've seen it time and time and time and time and time again, just how resilient they are. And they don't, just lay down and give up, because they easily could have done that. Easily. I'd just be like, crap, this game got out of hand quick, and it is what it is. Antti Ranta, had he not been there in that first period, the game would have been over after the first period if he wasn't there doing his job and standing on his head. It could have been so much worse than what it was, but thankfully, just enough was done to keep the Hurricanes in it throughout the game. Second and third periods, especially. Jesper Foss ended up tying it up with towards the back end of the period. I want to say it was like 6 minutes left or something like that. It was not a lot of time left whenever he tied it up, and that was big. And Brett Pesce, he's big part of that. He set up Foss beautifully with that. And Pesce had a 2-assist night. He played a really vital role in the Hurricanes winning that game. And then, of course, it did go into overtime as well. And definitely towards the end of regulation, Freddie Anderson making some big top stops to force it to go to overtime. And that was really, really big, in my opinion. It felt like, all right, they're rallying. They got some energy. They're like, we can get at least 1 point out of this. And thankfully they did. And they were lucky to get that 1 point. They really, really were, because they were not the better team. They were lucky to come away with the win. And in overtime was definitely a lot better. And the Hurricanes had decent puck possession. They cleaned it up. And they were a big thing with that. Carrying over from the back end of the third as well into overtime, is it felt like they were playing with a purpose. They had a fire under them, which, going back to that first period, this is exact opposite. There, they looked tired. They looked gassed. They looked like they were lucky to have even shown up to the game. And they played with a purpose in this overtime, and they're creating chances. And whereas during regulation, Andrei Svechnikov, he was a bit of a liability when it came to penalties. He really made up for it here in overtime. He really stood out and really playing hard, really pushing. And that was really, really big for the Hurricanes. And of course, didn't win it in overtime. So we go to a shootout. And this shootout, I was on the edge of my seat with this. It was really, really tense, because again, we're like, oh my God, we're lucky we've gotten this far because of how poorly they played. And the fact that we actually have a legitimate chance to win this is on the edge of your seat. And as you are in most shootouts, you're going to be on the edge of your seat. But Brent Burns and Teuvo Teravainen scoring. Teuvo's goal was picture perfect of what you need to do in a shootout. Like, if you're a coach, you're coaching kids, show them that. That's what you need to do there. And then, of course, you couldn't have scripted it better. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, while he's getting showered and showered with booze from Montreal, scores the game-winning goal for the Hurricanes. Again, you couldn't have scripted it better. Every time he touched the puck, he was getting booed. Same with Sebastian Aho. Those guys were getting booed out of the building, and for Jesperi to be the guy to win it in a shootout, nonetheless, it was really big. And like I said, the Hurricanes did just enough to stay in this game, and they're lucky to come away with the win. And my big takeaway from this game is you can never underestimate your opponent. And this shows it because, you're coming off of two dominant performances. Going to this one, thing is going to be a cakewalk. It was not. The Hurricanes were very, very lucky to come away with the 2 points that they did. And not only did luck be on their side there, New Jersey also lost, so they're able to widen their lead when it comes to the Metro Division. But we did also get to hear from Rod Brind'Amour after the game. And he had a lot to say, and we're going to hear just what Rod had to say right after this quick break, folks. Now, the Hurricanes are playing again on Thursday against the Philadelphia Flyers. And if you're wanting to place a bet on that game, make sure you do so at FanDuel. Or if you're a Charlotte Hornets fan, a Lakers fan, whatever, the midway point of the NBA season is here. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because no new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. And heck, if you bet on Jesperi Kotkaniemi winning it in a shootout, that could have been some big money for you. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss this chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Now, folks, as I mentioned earlier, Rod Brind'Amour did mention Antti Raanta and Jalen Chatfield being taken out of the game merely as precautionary measures, and with Antti Raanta being lower body, Jalen Chatfield being upper body. But he had a lot more to say after the game, and this is just what Rod had to say after that game against Montreal.
Rod, when we talked after the second period, you said you felt like the group was still trying to fully get to its game. How do you guys feel like you did in the third to push it into OT?
Right. Well, that's a lot kinder than how I put it to you, but we were struggling clearly for 2 periods, and and then we just put a period together that looked kind of like we need to play and how we usually play, and at least got us back in the game and able to find a way to squeeze it out.
We've seen a lot of NHL games in your career. Former players going against his former team under a reign of booze. How does that rank?
Well, you're right. I've seen it a lot worse than that. But it's I don't know. It was kind of fun, to be honest with you. We know the history here, and I get it. And but KK's a good kid. And I was just happy for him to be able to do that, because I know he's taking a lot of heat, unnecessary. But that's just how it works. I get it. When a guy leaves a team, we understand how that goes. So I'm just happy for him.
Were you guys maybe surprised by the way they battled in the first 2 periods?
By the way, who battled? They did? No, I'm not surprised. They played us hard the other night, too. I was really surprised how poorly we were playing, to be quite honest. But I wasn't surprised by how they played. I know they're going to play hard. They always do.
What do you think that disallowed them?
I understand why. It looks like we're going right into it. I thought maybe we actually got tripped. If you look, Stepan's right skate gets actually kind of tripped by the Montreal player. They actually didn't even consider that, so it is what it is.
Complacency might be a bit of a strong word here, but is it kind of maybe a wake-up call to say, hey, let's be in check in the first.
Yeah, well, listen, we haven't had one of those games all year. That was the first game that I've, at least for 2 periods, where I could say, what are we doing? It's not happened. So it's human nature. We're going to have some little bit ups and downs. We've had a little tough travel schedule, and we just came off a real big victory. And, there's obviously a little bit of human element here. And we got a lot of, we got humans in there too. And they're going to have these days. And, but I give the guys a lot of credit because they found a way.
Do you have anything on Ranta and Czech?
Yeah. We're also in a position that if anyone goes, I got a little nicked up, we just take them out of the game. So precautionary really on both guys. So I don't think it'll be serious for you.
Derek Stepp on line with some great looks tonight. Jesper Foss, obviously that line with some great looks tonight. 2 goals from your back end to get you out of that deficit. I mean, how crucial is all of this depth at this point?
Well, you watched this all year. It's not a one-man show. I mean, if we rely on one guy to get all our offense, it's not going to happen. So we need everyone to step up when they get their opportunities. And tonight we had different guys do it. That maybe be a different couple guys the next game. But we need all 20 guys on board. And when we do, it looks like it did in the third.
All right. Thanks, Rod. Thanks, everyone.
Guys, have a good day.
So obviously, in listening to Rod, wasn't a great game. As he said, this was first game where he's really wondering, what are they doing? But they were able to pull it together there in the third, like I said, and that was really big. And I really feel like going into the game against Philly, they're going to be looking at the tape from this game of being like, what were you doing right here? And they're really going to use this game as a learning experience going forward. Over these next few games. I really feel like this was a learning experience. And, like you said, these are humans. Mistakes are going to happen. And we all know, like, hey, no team is going to go 82-0. Like, we all know that. There's going to be bad games. But the fact that they're able to pull this together, in my opinion, that really says a lot about this team of just how resilient they are. It feels cliche to say, it really does, because it's been said so much about the team, over these past few years of them being so resilient when it comes to this kind of stuff and never giving up. But they really were. Like I said, this game really could have gotten out of hand early, and they could have just rolled over and just be like, all right, time to move on to Philly. But that wasn't the case. They stayed fighting all game long. They're able to pull it together, got it done. And the fact that they were able to do just enough to even be in the mix to even win this game, that was really big, and says a lot, about the guys that stepped up, in this game. And, the fourth line pulling a big load. It's a team game. It's not going to be the case where, your top guys are always doing it every night. Sometimes, people have bad days and off nights. You're going to need, like your fourth line to step up. You're going to need a guy like Brett Pesce, a guy who it's not necessarily his thing of, setting up a whole bunch of stuff. He did it. And we know he can do it. It's just not one of those things he's relied on to do. Like Teuvo Teravainen scoring a hat trick the other night. You don't expect that from Teuvo. He's the guy you expect to be setting up all the shots. But the Hurricanes got it done, and now it's time to move on to Philly. But it is Wednesday, folks, and it is time to debut a new segment called Wolves Wednesday, where we talk about the Chicago Wolves. And for our first topic with that, we're going to talk about Pyotr Kochetkov, because he's had an interesting past few games, and we will do that right after this quick break, folks. Now, it is really, really nice outside today, and if you're wanting to go out on a walk or go fishing or whatever, Built Bar is the snack for you. You got to be taking it with you. And those of you that have been around for a long time, all about Built Bars. But if you're new here, let me tell you about them. Built Bars is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. And you may be asking yourself, what do you mean? How are they so good? Well, first off, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. and that's a big part of it. And they come in a whole host of flavors like churro, coconut almond, and my personal favorite, peanut butter brownie. And there are flavors for everyone. You can go to built.com and look at all of their flavors. And best of all, built bars are again incredibly healthy, containing only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. So you're wanting to keep working at getting in shape. Built bars is the snack for you for that. And again, they have so many great flavors. But if you want them right now, you can go to your local Walmart or at Sam's Club. I saw them at Walmart earlier today when I was there, and you can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs there at Walmart. Or if you have a Sam's Club membership, you can run down there and get a 13-bar box of brownie batter and churro. Those are two of the best flavors. You got to try those guys. And again, if none of those are ones you want, go to their website, built.com, and find something that is just for you. They have so many flavors. They have something for everyone. So go check out Built Bar today. Now, folks, it's time to dive into the first edition of Wolves Wednesday. And it's time to talk about Pyotr Kochetkov because over this past week, he had a very interesting time, and he scored a goalie goal, which was great. Something that that hurt. I believe it. Oh God, I want to say it happened during that Arizona game. I want to say, but it was one of those things like everyone's going crazy, loving it. Obviously, he's celebrating big time with that. And Manitoba, they came out, they didn't like it. They're trying to fight him. But then in the next game, I forget who Chicago is playing, but he gets ejected from that game as well after trying to fight. And one thing I've seen folks raise on social media is his hot-headedness going to be a problem. And I reached out to Sarah Avampato. You guys know her from Locked on Kings, Locked on NHL, but she also covers the Wolves for SB Nation's Canes Country. And I reached out to her this morning, and this is what she had to say when I asked her about this. She said, I think the answer, quote, I think the answer is yes and no. I don't see him as a future Jordan Binnington turning into a giant crybaby, giant angry baby over nothing. But I do think he is easily provoked, and other teams will learn to use that to their advantage. Like he had to know that Manitoba was going to go after him because they were going to be mad about him going nuts celebrating that goal. It would be great to see him learn not to engage. That said, he does know when to time it at least. Both of the ejections came in the final minute of play when there was no chance that him getting kicked out was going to cost the Wolves the game. I think some of it just comes with being young, knowing that getting feisty like that gets a reaction from the other team and from fans. So I'd like to think he'll grow out of it as he matures or has some other veteran goalie take him under his wing and tell him to knock it off. And this is something I really, really agree with. I don't see this being a long-term issue with Pyotr. I don't see that being the case. I think, as time goes on and he grows older, I think we're not going to see that as much, at least when it comes to the ejections kind of deal. I do see him being, a guy that he's, if a guy, kind of squares up, maybe takes a cheap shot on him, he isn't going to let that slide, like he did in the playoffs against Brad Marchand. He squared up to him like, no, you're not going to do that. I do see that being the case. I don't see him being a guy to lay down and just let other teams get away with stuff. I don't see that being the case, but I do think he is definitely going to need to mature some. And, I've mentioned it before. He is the only goalie under contract for the Hurricanes next season. Freddie and Auntie both UFAs. So you imagine, especially with how good he has been at the NHL level, he'll be one of the goalies here for the Hurricanes in Raleigh next season. And I feel that when that time comes, in my opinion, it will be next season, but say it's not next season, say it's the season after. Maturity will be a big thing. How old is he now? I know he is obviously early 20s, younger than me, of course, but he is Pyotr Kochetkov age. He is 23 years old, June 25th, 1999. So next season he'll be 24 years old. I think that, maturity, that's the big thing here. He's got to just learn to get his emotions under control. He does that, I think he'll be good. And I don't think it's going to be a long-term issue. I do think that whenever he gets to the NHL level, I think that will be one thing that they really talk to him about, is getting those emotions in check and not letting other people get to him like that. And, not doing it for a reaction. And I do think that is something that Rod Brind'Amour and company, they will kind of get that out of him. And, we've seen that with Svetch, not like this, but, some of his mistakes and just growth as a player. Some of those things, the mistakes he was making were young guy mistakes. Whenever he signed that big extension, I mentioned that, I didn't expect a complete turnaround with some of the mistakes he was making, like penalties especially. I knew it wasn't going to be an overnight change. I knew it was going to be something that was going to take time, but we are seeing it now. Hey, he's matured a lot, and he's not making those mistakes that he used to. Yeah, he still takes penalties, but it's not as bad as it was. Like last night against Montreal, that was, for me, I hadn't really noticed like him being a liability out there on the ice like that when it came to penalties. And he wasn't like a big liability. It was just like, come on, man. And that's kind of where we're at with Pyotr. It's kind of like a come on, man, kind of deal of like, get it in check. Come on now. I know it's getting irritated, but you got to learn to just walk away, ignore it. Again, don't let another team push you around. Stand up for yourself, but also like know when to just walk away. That's going to be a big thing. And again, that's a maturity thing. And I think as time goes on, that is something that will get worked out of him. He just needs to get older. Rod Brind'Amour ain't going to put up with that. And, say he's with Freddie next season, say Freddie resigns. Freddie's been around for a long time. I think, that'd be a good place to a good goalie to learn under. We'll see what happens when it comes to that kind of deal next offseason, what they decide to do there. But I don't think his hot-headedness is anything to worry about. And I think we would know if it was something to worry about, we'd be talking a different story in like 3-4 years. If we're still having this problem, then okay, then it's an issue. But right now, 23 years old, and someone does need to sit him down. Don't get me wrong, someone there in Chicago needs to sit him down and talk to him. Be like, hey, chill out a little bit, get your emotions in check some. Don't let these teams get to you. Like, I know you're liking the reaction, you're getting when you do this kind of stuff, but gotta tone it down. Gotta know when to pick your battles. That good life advice there in general of know when to pick your battles, but that's the same applies here. He's got to know when to pick his battles. Don't let other teams get to them. But I don't see this being a long-term issue. Yeah, maybe, over the remainder of this season, next 1 or 2, okay, maybe it's still a bit of a problem. You just it's gotta mature. We all took time to mature. It wasn't like, we just came out mature adults, So it's going to take time, but I don't see this being a long-term issue. But that's just my opinion. Let me know your opinion on Twitter. Tweet at the show at LO_Hurricanes. Tweet at myself at Jared Ellis _96, or leave a comment on the YouTube video. So make sure you're subscribed there. And I will talk to you guys in the next episode where we preview tomorrow's game against the Philadelphia Flyers. And as always, folks, let's go Canes.